Hello, you're looking at one pack of every booster pack from the Star Trek customizable card game, 1994 to 2002. I played the game back in 94, mostly played this set right here, 1994, white border alpha. That was the bulk of my collection. Stopped around Deep Space Nine. Haven't really gotten back into the game until I saw a video, YouTube video, shout out to Sci-Fi by Maddie, who opened up one of every booster pack, all the ones you're seeing now, kind of got me back into the game. And I thought I'd replicate and extend that video. And with me today, I thought I'd do it by, when I got back into the game, I really didn't know what the cards were, or what the strategies were, what different sets introduced into the game. So I thought, let me open them up with some experts who know a little bit more than I do, a lot more than I do, what they're talking about. So I've got on this video series, player expert, Johannes Klarhauser, and two collector experts, Dan Winterhalter and Tom Target. Let's just start by, doing introductions, where you're from, how you got into the Star Trek CCG, and what's your involvement right now. Johannes, let's start with you as the player expert.
Hello, my name is Johannes. I'm from the Munich area in Germany, and I started Star Trek CCG in about 1995 when I picked up a starter deck randomly, played around with friends a little bit, but didn't really have a lot of people to play with. So I just collected the sets that came out. Didn't have a lot of money back then, but I stayed with the game. And when second edition came out, I switched to that, played that for about 10 years, and around 10 years or so, I got back into first edition and then started playing properly with going to tournaments and so on. And since then, I've started to run my own tournaments, and I'm involved in the playing scene much more than I am a collector of cards.
Thanks, Johannes. Dan, why don't you introduce yourself?
Dan Winterhalter. I live in Denver, Colorado. Sort of similar story. I got involved when a friend of mine dragged me into a card store so he could go buy some magic packs. I knew that was a money sink, so I went ahead and bought the Star Trek game that was sitting there brand new in 1995 too. 30 years later, I'm sitting in front of all of everything. I've loved playing. I bought and dealt people's collections in the early 2000s. And played a little bit, but really stopped playing just after DS9 as well.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Tom.
I'm Tom Target, and despite sounding like a rejected member of the British royal family, I live in California now. I got into this card game right around the time Star Trek Generations was coming out. The Blockbuster video in my hometown had a special promotion, a wall of Star Trek products you could pick, and one of which was the customizable card game. I got some packs. And between me and about 5 friends in this town, we were the only ones who were buying these packs. Even though the promotion ended and all the other Star Trek items went away, because they'd sold us so many starter decks, they agreed to buy in some other decks from some other blockbusters that hadn't sold out. And that's how we got access to them to begin with. I really mostly played in the 94, 95 era. I dabbled a little bit with AU and Q. But at the beginning of an event that began a couple of years ago now, I was looking at my collection and I realized I was one card away from finishing my 1994 set. So I went onto eBay and I bought that card, and then I felt like doing something. So I thought, oh, maybe I should buy a box of AU. And that turned into completing AU, and that turned into completing Q. And that just went down the chain all the way through until half of my salary is now invested in that collection. So it's been wonderful to get back into it as a collector, and still I'm looking forward to playing again. I usually will probably restrict my games to some of the earlier expansions, but it's so much fun.
Thanks, Tom.
Mike, why don't you introduce yourself too?
Yeah, I know I missed that from the first time. Appreciate that, Dan. Thanks again. I'm the guy that was speaking earlier before. Facts are in front of me here. I'm Mike Sember. I'm a psychologist and dad in upstate New York. Just happy you're all here to help me open up these packs and learn more about the game with you all. So, in that vein, again, I stopped playing 94, 95. Johannes, you are our player expert. Can you just briefly summarize how to play the game, the card types? Like, what's this game all about?
Okay, I'll try it. Star Trek CCG is a collectible card game in which players build decks from their personal collection and use them to create scenes and episodes with elements from the Star Trek universe. So locations, characters, ships. It starts with a seed phase where you kind of create your universe. You lay out missions that represent locations from the universe. You populate it with outposts where you can report ships. You hide artifacts at planets. You set up dilemmas that represent bad stuff that happens to your opponents. And you play your favorite personal and ships from the show to move around. So every player takes a turn, reports personnel, moves around the spaceline, tries to solve missions. So it's very diverse, and what appealed to me is that it had a lot less of a focus on the battle component than other games like that. So it was much more diplomatic in that approach.
What's the current state of the game? You know, who's playing this? How are you playing this? Is the game kind of similar from the early days? Is it much different from 1994 to now?
The game was vastly different at different stages in its development. If we just look at the Decipher period, it started out as a relatively tame game where you played one card and you drew one card as the standard. And by the time Decipher discontinued the game, it had actually developed to a state where you could have 12 personnel and 4 ships in play on your first turn with about 50, 60 weapons. And in that period, some games ended before the second player actually had a proper turn after the seed phase, because by that time they had already lost. And so during the Decipher period, I didn't enjoy it too much. But after Decipher discontinued the game or both Star Trek games in 2007, a players' initiative started looking at what are the most glaring problems in the game. And over a 10-15 period now, they have been trying to fix the worst offenders. And now I find the game to be quite well balanced, where it's faster than the original game, but not as ridiculous as it was when the game ended. And these virtual cards that have been introduced have done a great job of bringing a lot of players like me back, because now it was actually playable again, and you didn't get stomped by people who knew all the in and outs. It's a much more level playing field.
And all these packs from first edition are the Decipher era, right? Decipher era ended after second edition, maybe a few years after first edition. Is that right?
I think it's the last proper set, All Good Things, was in 2003 or something like that. And then later on, there was the Enterprise collection, which I think wasn't that well received. And by that time, they had already started second edition and then discontinued 1E entirely.
So the kind of degenerate state of the game that you mentioned, I know we only have one of every booster pack from first edition, but when we get down to these packs down here, are you saying this is kind of the degenerate piece right here, or did it come after first edition?
Especially Voyager introduced a lot of stuff that was way ahead of the power curve of the sets before. So in the group of players that I usually play with, people consider the time from around Deep Space Nine, Blaze of Glory, to be the golden era, where the game was in a really nice state, and you had enough complexity to not be boring, and not yet on the ridiculous level that you then had in Voyager and the Borg and motion pictures and holodeck.
Cool. Yeah, Deep Space Nine is kind of where I stopped, so I'm excited to talk through those packs and those videos with you all. That's kind of the golden age of the game. It was certainly after my time, and also curious to hear about these degenerate pieces. Not having a second turn sounds pretty harsh if you're trying to play a friendly game of Star Trek. So you mentioned these virtual cards, but what kind of format is it now? Are some of these cards banned, restricted? What's kind of the format or tournament kind of flavor like?
What was done was that there were some restrictions introduced. For example, there is now a rule that you can only download personal into play once every turn. And especially in the later stages of Decipher's period, you had a lot of cards that you could use, and you were allowed to use all of that on your first turn. So if you won the coin flip and went first, you could immediately put a lot of stuff in play.
Oh.
And that's one of the things that they used, for example, to dial back the speed a little bit. And they tried to make all those, what I find really appealing, all those old cards, the Black Border Premier and so on, and Alternate Universe Continuum, a lot of those cards were relatively weak in power level compared to the skill monsters in Voyager, for example. And some of the virtual cards increase boosts, give you bonuses when you play with those older cards. So the idea was to bring them up to kind of the same level as the powerful Delta Quadrant affiliations were.
Okay. Anything else that you think is important as a kind of an intro to the playing aspect of the game?
I think it's most important thing is that you can have fun whichever period you decide to play in, as long as you and the guys that you play with agree on the set. For example, my group is kind of competitive tournament players. We travel to tournaments around the world and we think a lot about deck construction, but at the same time, we also enjoy a couple of sealed tournaments where you just open an OTSD pack, take whatever you find and make the best out of that. So I think there's something for everyone.
Cool. Yeah, it was really, really fun to hear when I got kind of back into this last year that a lot of people are playing. You're putting YouTube videos up of playing, which is really, really, really awesome to see so many people are engaged and continuing the game so many years. Not just after the game started, but after the game discontinued, after Decipher lost the license and they weren't making any more cards. It's still going. That's pretty amazing. So, all right, thanks, Johannes. Dan and Tom, I'm going to try to pin both of you here. So you can talk to us a little about the collecting side of the game. Let me see if I can do it. There we go. We got Dan and Tom. Can I add the pin to you? Yeah. All right. So Dan and Tom are our collector experts. Can you just briefly summarize the collectability of the game since from '94 till now?
You want it or should I?
Go ahead, Dan.
So the game's always appealed to collectors, or at least to collectors like me, because of how deep into the episodes the cards go. Yes, you've got your Picard and your Data and your main cast, but you're also you've got cards and pieces of the Star Trek universe that are really deep cuts. You get Vacor and Narek and Baron's whole crew from one episode. You can play that entire crew as a functional ship where you can collect it. And it's made it very, very interesting because you go into this next expansion and you get really deep cuts into the Klingons that have showed up in different parts of the universe, or the Ferengi that have shown up in different parts of the universe. And so most people, their favorite minor character has a card, if not several. And so there's a lot of fun just from that aspect, looking at how deep and how varied what's in the game goes. Going more into that, the different sets have different levels of collectability, different because they were produced at different quantities at different times. So we have certain sets that are really common even now, and we have certain sets that are nearly impossible because Decipher made short runs because they weren't selling as much at the end. So they became much, much more valuable. When you talk about collecting, you have I want to have a set. I want to have all the unopened product collectors. You've got people collecting so that they can get them signed. So there's lots of different aspects of folks who want the cards for different reasons.
I think you were just describing the room behind you, the sealed product.
That's it, yes.
the binder, the sets, and then the autographs as well.
Absolutely. I'm an all of the above collector.
And I think when it comes to the market for these kind of things and how they want to collect, for me, it was very much, the memory of opening these cards, the age I was, playing at a time when we'd only had a few decks and, one new deck opening could change our entire game because no one had a QNet yet. And my friend who played Klingons just couldn't get past my QNet. But then he opened a deck and he pulled 2 Vorcha classes and now he could outgun me. And then I pulled something. I love those sort of early stages as a kid, limited by money, but where our sort of group meta would change moment to moment. And that's why for me, when I came back to collecting this game much more recently, I only sort of been in this for the last couple of years, it was that sort of wonderful feeling of completing that set, which was something that wasn't possible for me 20 years ago when I was doing that in real time. So that had a huge appeal. And then getting into the further expansions, my goal was very much to try and get as many cards from pack as possible. And it was amazing to see that sort of psychological creep of, the early packs you can still buy sealed. The only way I could start to make a dent in some of the mid-level expansions was to buy reflections boxes to try and flesh those out, because I couldn't buy that many DS9 boosters. But also, I think of the quote from the episode of Mock Time, where we are told that having is not such a pleasing a thing as wanting. I might agree with you if I had everything, but at the moment, it's still so much fun tracking down these cards that I want. And even though I never played with them, most of my playing happens with the first 3 sets or so. But it's been wonderful just to, as Dan said, look at these cards. That I think they're so well done in terms of the artwork they chose. I love the look of them. It's great to see what they did trying to build factions. And I think when it comes to the actual market, obviously there's been a lot of change in that in the last couple of years, and we're going to see change into the future, mostly driven by supply and demand availability of the ever diminishing sealed element of it. But for whatever your reason for collecting is, I think, and the reason we're here today is it's just wonderful to open sealed packs, and it's wonderful to get that little buzz of what's it going to be, what's inside, the pros, the cons, all the little things you can find. And that's why I love this game.
One of the things I love about collecting is kind of the richness of the emotional connection you have. Dan, you mentioned you can it sounds like you don't even have to be a fan of the card game to appreciate kind of the nuance with the different characters, the different actors, and kind of the attachment we have as Star Trek fans. And time you're talking about too, the emotional connection to playing the game, which certainly I had, in 94, 95, but also the emotional connection to opening up packs. I mean, as a kid, I just loved getting packs, seeing what was in there, and certainly opening up sealed product really brings that joy back to me.
Absolutely. And the digging into the depth of the lore, like you go in and you wonder why this common Klingon from the first set is named Katesh, and you find out that John Tesh guest starred as a Klingon with no lines because he wanted to. And so there's so much depth that it just cycles, and it's so much fun to play through.
Right. So the Cypher didn't have the character name, so that became the name of the character.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Plus, also in the early days, we have to remember there wasn't always easy access to a complete list of cards, let alone their rarities. And I had to kind of build a sort of headcanon list of what was probably rare, common, or uncommon based upon how many of them I just happened to have in the small number I answered. Whereas today, you can find everything straight away. And it's that sort of wonder of not even knowing what's out there when you start it. And I think I'd like to echo the point Dan made as well. I think one of the reasons this game was so great is just because of the flavor of it. As Johannes said at the beginning, especially, it wasn't a combat themed game. It was like playing an episode. You would gather a crew on a ship, solve missions, encounter dilemmas. There'd be random events and fluctuations, but you could control and interact with it. It was a close feeling to sort of what it would be like if you could build a mix-up episode from some of the events and things you'd seen in the series. And that's why I think it was a well-done game.
From the collectability piece, I know you both kind of have different relationships with the game over the years, but anything surprise you kind of when you got back into the game, or just overall from where you were maybe when you started till now?
So I pretty much stopped collecting. I kind of gave up on it in 2008 or 2009. I had loved it, and I had been buying sealed product ever since I got out of college, and made all my sets and finished everything, and was buying people's collections off of eBay as they found their shoebox and started liquidating them, and then selling sets. But I stopped being able to sell the sets. Like, there was nobody buying sets at that point. And so I went through all of my stuff and said, okay, if I'm the only person left on the planet who likes this game, what am I keeping? What am I getting rid of? And I'll deal with it later. I looked online because I was inventorying my Star Trek collection 10 years later and went, oh my God, there's 2 extra zeros on the end of everything from what I remember paying, from what I remember paying attention to. And it blew my mind. And then I found the Facebook group that I've met all of you through, and found that there's actually still 2,000 of us interested in this game, at least. 2,000 of us who bothered to find the Facebook group are still interested in this game 20 years later. And that's been amazing. As a collector, I love that the collecting doesn't ever have to be done. Like, yes, I have the set, I have the pretty binders, they're all done, it's all in there, but that doesn't mean I can't make a new want list to make a new deck or to make a new copy of this set so that I can go out and trade with people who are still super excited about trading a 25-year-old game.
Yeah, for me, my objective, this was something to pass time, but also I wanted to try and build a complete set funded almost exclusively by buying and selling and trading. And it was great. And the good thing is the market you're dealing with is generally fairly positive. So the Facebook group that we're part of, I've had so many great experiences dealing with people there. It's wonderful to help them plug gaps in their sets. It's great when they can help you. Also, you're dealing on eBay, you're dealing online. A fairly trustworthy group of people are going to be Star Trek fans collecting a 20-year-old game. So it's been fairly positive. And it's been great for me to sort of work towards that goal within those confines in a way. It's like I was almost saying at the beginning, playing the game in the early days was wonderful because of limited numbers of cards. Trying to make my collection from only buying and selling and trading rather than inputting any extra money, too much extra money into it like that, was also has been a nice thing to do during that time. So I've really enjoyed the discussions I've had with people, arranging trades or arranging things like that. And the market today is obviously, it's going to continue to change. We are going to see obviously a transition towards fewer and fewer individual sealed products available. But the good news is for those people, either if you're just getting started, it is going to be more daunting than it was before, probably at the moment. But the good news is there's still plenty of sets you can pull from sealed packs. And there are, as Dan mentioned, a good number of people still involved in this process, whether it's just for fun or more professionally. And so as a result, it's amazing that I can still enjoy interacting with folks and doing this over this game that's been around for so long and still continues to be played and collected.
Well, it's been great hearing from you three. You certainly got me excited to open up all these packs. Just kind of talking more about Star Trek and getting back in to the game is, I'm just real excited to go through with all of you. And yeah, what we're going to do in this video series, this is our introductory video. We are going to be talking more in depth with our experts here, with you three, and opening each pack, talking through what the set did for the game, what the collector pieces are, one by one. So I'm real excited to do that. Let's get our the stars of our show here. Yeah, there are the packs. But thanks all for sharing. Again, I'm excited to open up the packs. So we're going to open up each one of these. Get to hear from all the folks here about the cards that we open up. And if you're watching this far in the video, just real excited to share this experience with you. Thanks for being here. And let's get going with opening up some Star Trek CCG.